In today's surveillance-obsessed world, is it still possible to open truly anonymous accounts in first-tier banks? We're not talking about Belize banana republics nor payment platforms. I'm talking about high street banks in Europe, in the United States, and in Asia, the ones you thought were completely off limits. Let's find out. This is episode 7 of the Poor Man's Pablo Escobar series, where we dive into the underworld of offshore finances and give our own commentary. And in today's case, we have the popular Tate brothers who tried opening anonymous accounts using a fake Mexican passport with a James Bond alias. Turns out millions can't buy you common sense, but the truth is that anonymous accounts absolutely exist, only under the Russian way. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to break down how and why the Russian method works, the one trait that Westerners need to actually pull it off, and of course, a step-by-step breakdown on how you can do it yourself without getting flagged. Let's dive straight into it. Anonymous bank accounts in first-tier countries with real compliance still work, but only if you have one thing: a reliable front. The frontman is the one who acts as the official owner and manager of the bank account. They're the ones who are going to sign those banking documents, the tax forms, and be part of the company registries. Meanwhile, you, the ultimate beneficial owner, stay in the shadows, and for that service, of course, you pay them a generous salary. Now, you would think that with all of the millions that the Tates have, Tristan Tate would just be able to buy a frontman, right? I mean, why go through faking a Mexican passport and adding a bunch of criminal charges out of thin air? Because they can't trust anybody. In Western society, that is extremely tough to do. Other than his other notorious brother, there's nobody else to rely upon. Western society is extremely commercial and contractual, which is great for business, but terrible for building relationships and loyalty. Because handing over your assets to someone else with a silent agreement requires deep mutual trust. Because the frontmen can literally walk away with all of your money, but at the same time, they're legally responsible for all the stuff that you're doing behind the scenes. And that's why it works. Both parties know and trust each other very well. They understand that each party has the other's fate in their hands, and paradoxically, that's what makes it work. Latin Americans, a lot of Eastern Europeans, and Middle Easterners are raised this way from a very early age. They have a code of conduct, and they have these strong tribal and family bonds throughout their entire lives. In contrast, the Western norm is you only spend time with your family twice per year during Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you only call them to ask for money. But some of the best nominees that the Easterners use are their family members. And it only works if you have a good relationship with your parents and siblings. One of the best examples I can give you is the Moroccan football player Hakimi. When his ex-gold-digging wife tried taking half of his shit after the divorce, she found out that he owned nothing. Everything was in his mother's name, including his PSG salary. And by the way, the structure, it also works in Western countries. We'll dive a bit into the details later on. Now, just because the strategy works does not mean it's easy to pull off today, especially in first-tier countries. And that's why the Russian method is getting more expensive. Used to be cheap. Just found a Forrest Gump off the streets, you paid him pennies, and you opened a bank account in his name. But with modern-day banking compliance, that's pretty much dead. Today, most of those accounts are opened in a company's name. And during the corporate account opening process, your nominee, the frontman, gets interviewed. And he's asked questions like, what's the company's business? What's the purpose of the account? Why specifically this jurisdiction? And what's the plan for the future funds? And he has to be sharp and answer convincingly. His story needs to make sense from the bank's perspective. And most importantly, he needs to have a passport that checks out. In modern banking, presentation matters. And the smarter and more coherent your frontman is with the right passport, banks really like that. And of course, that's why they get paid a premium. In lower tier countries like Turkey, you can still get away with dragging someone off the street to see the bank manager. In fact, that's what a lot of OTC dealers do to trade cryptos not in their name. But when it comes to Switzerland, Liechtenstein, or the UK, forget about it. That's why Turkish businesses dealing with international banks will actually find ethnic Northern Cypriots who hold an EU Cyprus passport to be their frontman. And Colombians do the same thing. They have a bunch of aunts and uncles in the UK or the US who will receive decent pensions into their bank accounts. And after the 2014 Ukraine war, Russians, suddenly seeing their passports discriminated, did pretty much the same thing. They went to the Donbass region in the Ukraine, where there are a bunch of ethnic Russians with Ukrainian passports, and used those guys as frontmen, which the Swiss banks were far more comfortable dealing with. Now, let me break a common myth here. The Russian way is not the same as those cheap nominee services that are usually bundled up in these offshore company packages, where you have a Panamanian guy or a Cypriot who signs off as a director or a shareholder on paper, but they also make you sign a bunch of other documents that protect them and limit their legal liability. And those other documents, such as the deed of trust, the POA, by their very nature means that the nominee is not really the person in charge. They're just there to hide your name from the public registries. Because by signing off as the ultimate beneficial owner, they're the ones that take all of the legal responsibility for your actions. And no sane person is going to sign off on all those bank account forms or the payment platforms for a guy that they don't even know. You could be an international drug trafficker, and they would be the ones that take the hit. And by the way, this stuff happens a lot. So if somebody ever offers you a lot of money to be the person signing off on all these documents, don't do it. Your freedom is far more valuable than some quick buck that you're going to make. And another misconception is that trusts will not make you anonymous when it comes to banking. Especially in Switzerland or Liechtenstein, they will ask who created the trust and also all the beneficiary names. If you want to open an anonymous account for your trust, even the Rothschilds, they still had to use a frontman named Khodorkovsky, as I explained in more detail in this video. So, how do you, as a Westerner, apply all of this? Is there still a way for you to get these accounts? And the answer is absolutely, as long as you have reliable family members. In the case of Hakimi, he had his mother, and that's the best asset protection mechanism for you. But you want to make sure that you have a structure where it doesn't require your family members to be financial geniuses. So let me give you a step-by-step guide that a lot of Latin Americans, Indians, and Russians still use to this day. We'll use your Uncle Craig, who's not a financial genius, who's able to present it all to the banks. And you can even use this structure to move your cryptos into bank accounts and hide their ties to you from prying eyes. Step number 1, start small. Startups and small businesses have an easy time opening bank accounts and EMI accounts, but it must be something that matches Craig's skill set. You want to open a corporate payment platform account with Revolut, Mercury, Airwallex, whatever matches the jurisdiction, and that's where you're going to be sending the first initial deposit into the bank account from. And then step number 2, you want to make sure that the business that Craig runs actually matches what he knows. The backstory needs to check out, because otherwise the banks, they'll sniff him out very quickly. You don't make an ex-electrician the CEO of a crypto trading platform. You want something that you can train him to speak about confidently. And from the bank's perspective, it makes perfect sense why he would be upgrading to a bank account, because payment platforms are riskier for holding money there long term. Step number 3, train the nominee. Spend a few days and go over the business plan with him. You want to make sure that Craig is comfortable with it. You can go with ChatGPT or even read the E-Myth, highly recommended book, to build the operational framework for the company. You will, however, need contracts, agreements, invoices, and apostilled financial statements to present to the bank. You can check my previous videos for more ideas on that front. And then step number 4 is the actual bank interview. Now, during the interview, the bank manager, they will have 4 questions in mind. First, why does Craig's business need a bank account in this particular jurisdiction and in this particular bank? Then secondly, how does the business actually operate and where does it make its money? Third, what are going to be the inflows into the bank account? And then fourth, how are you planning on using that money afterwards? Pro tip, tell them that you want to keep it in the bank long term. They obviously love it because the bank makes more money that way. However, here's a key point. You will not accompany him to the interview. He does it all by himself because otherwise that defeats the whole purpose. The bank manager is going to say, okay, well, what's your ties to the business? You want to stay invisible. Step number 4.5, banks log where the accounts are accessed from. So Craig, he needs to register and access the bank account from devices and IPs that you can securely reach. And this all has to be built into the company's backstory, especially if you're living abroad. If not, your accounts can quickly get flagged. And then step number 5, once the account has already been opened, the hard part is over. You can now start moving money inside, again, depending on what the backstory was. If it was a mature operation, you can plow in larger amounts, but if you started off with a startup, you're gonna have to do it slowly through a trading company tied to the business and do it step by step with flexible accounting. Now that was a brief overview. Obviously, there's more detail that goes into every single step. But let's finish off on a practical note. Do not waste your time or money on these ready-made shelf companies with bank accounts. They're usually advertised on online forums. It's a company that's set up by somebody else with an active account. Then they transfer the ownership to you without informing the bank that the company has switched hands. And you're just expected to act as if nothing ever happened and use it. There are 2 problems with this. Number 1, by buying the company, you're inheriting all of its previous legal history, its liabilities, as well as its dirty laundry, without knowing the seller. And that can be a continuous compliance headache in the future. And secondly, banks continuously ask for information updates. And the moment that they ask for your ID or documents that do not match the previous account manager, they'll just shut off the account. It's not a long-term or sustainable solution. Anyway, I made a previous video for all of you crypto holders about how to obfuscate your gains from Dacate or Carf. You can check it out over there. But that's it for today's presentation. If you enjoy this type of content, you can comment down below or share it with a friend. I'll be seeing you next time, and until then, bye-bye.